And how do you find, because we call that millennial generation, the next generation are the young people now, how do you see the influence of secularism in Turkey with regards whether it's a Muslim or a Catholic or a Christian, you know, how do you see the impact of secularization in Turkey?
The impact of secularization in Turkey? Well,
among the young people.
Among the young people. I mean, this is a very difficult question because Turkey, for many decades, have been a very secular country.
Okay.
And there was a very secular culture linked with a part of the population. Now, these last decades, another part of the population has arrived in power and giving more importance to religion and especially to Islam. So, in public space, you have more religious symbols. They are more important. Especially Islamic symbols or symbols, who are remembering of the Ottoman Empire. So these symbols become more important in Turkey. But in the life of people, in the concrete life of people, is it important? Yes, I mean, for a part of the population, yes, for others, no. Is there an increasing secularism in Turkey? I'm not so sure. But yes, there is. But
it doesn't play a very important role or impact to the young generation, you know. They still follow tradition, right?
I mean, there are different groups in Turkey. And according if you are part of this group or of that group, you would be religious or not religious. But it is really linked to the culture and to the part of the society where you are from.
So you think this very important message to the world that whatever is our religious differences, dialogue is really very important, and that there should be continuity of seeking answer to everything that makes us different from each other. How do you see the interreligious plays a role in the Muslim world?
Yeah, I think something which might be very important to pay attention to is the question of fear. We fear each other. Whether it is Muslim fearing Christian or others Westerners, whether it is Westerners or Christians fearing Muslims for one reason or another. And we should recognize that there is that fear. We should not say, no, we don't fear. No, there is a fear. We should recognize it. And the question is how to fight against that fear. The only way to fight against that fear is to talk to the other. Okay. There is no other way. This is something we have to pay attention to. How to overcome our fears. Because I have been for a few days here in Turkey. When speaking with some people, they express their fear. Because obviously we have heard a lot about terrorism, Islamic State, and so on. And I always say the dog which barks most loudly is the small dog. And unfortunately, in Islam nowadays, we have small dogs who bark very loudly, called ISIS, called Al-Qaeda, all terrorist groups. They bark, but they represent almost no one in the Muslim world. But unfortunately, they make a lot of noise, and not only noise, they hurt many people as well, and in the Philippines too. So, but we shouldn't see Islam, or I don't like to speak about Islam. We should speak rather about Muslims. We shouldn't see Muslims only at the light of Al-Qaeda and all these Muslims who represent only a very small minority of Muslims. And in order to understand better our Muslim brothers and sisters, we should just talk with them to understand what their feelings and what's their needs behind these feelings. This is how we have to relate with one another, trying to talk to the other. So don't let yourself be overcome by fear.
I'm glad that you explained a little bit, that, this is very important, a reminder to people all over the world that don't let fear comes, to take over your life. But you are also a visiting lecturer in the University of...
the Jesuit Faculty of Theology in Paris. Yes, the Centre.
Yeah. So you teach about Muslim in the country. What is your topic there? What is the reaction of the student? Is this all priests, or theologian?
Yes, I have a bit of it's a bit diverse. So I have future priests or future Jesuits, or I have lay people who are a bit curious. And the main purpose of my course in Paris is to help people overcome their fears, I have to say.
Okay.
And I just give introductory courses to Islam, whether it is reading the Quran or introducing to the life of Muhammad, or giving an introduction to Islam in Europe. And I try to talk with them about their own fears, you know, so that they can relate to Muslim in another way. They can overcome their own prejudices. And in Europe, there are many prejudices against Islam. So I try to help them to overcome their fears. First of all, to be aware of their fears, and then to overcome them.
So you think that course really will help them a lot?
I mean, yes, I have had some people who have witnessed that after the class, this has changed their way of thinking. Thanks be to God. So yes, I think this course like that can change people, because this fear of Islam in Europe, where does it come from? It has two origins mainly. The first origin is obviously the current violence in the Muslim world. When we think about Islam in Europe, we think of, first of all, violence. The terrorism happening, whether it is in Europe, as you said, or in the Middle East, or in other countries. So obviously this creates a fear. The second fear comes from the presence of another
dimension
in Europe. No, not another dimension, but another culture. For seeing people, for example, seeing ladies with the hijab, this makes people, in France, this makes people afraid, because they think that Muslims are going to change the local culture, that there was a lot of fight in Europe to fight for the rights of women, for example. They think that Muslims can make them go back. For example, after, you may remember in the end of the 80s, the question of Salman Rushdie, the publication of the satanic verse and so on, and what happened afterwards. So they think that the presence of Muslim would be a threat against the freedom of thought, for example. No, you have these fears coming down. Or another kind of fear would be the fear of changing the culture. Seeing a mosque, for example, in a place where there were no mosques. So it's a bit as if strange people, foreigners, were invading your sitting room. Okay. You know, you don't feel at home. You were at home. You were with symbols, with your own words, your own way of living, of thinking, of eating, and then arrive another group with other symbols, and you don't know how to interpret these symbols. For example, in Switzerland, they have forbidden minarets. You can't build a mosque with minarets because it frightens people, because they don't know what the meaning of this. So this is the reason why we have to, in order to overcome our fears, we need to know what the other means by these symbols.
Thank you, Father Jean-Marc, for the beautiful discussion that we have. But we will continue sa pagbabalik po ng Power Tonight with Elvira.
The search is on for the best videos for, by, and with children. The Cinebata Video Festival, open to all Filipinos. Winners will receive prizes. For details, visit or contact the following.